On their anniversary evening, my husband handed me a one-way plane ticket and announced with a laugh, "That's it, Elena. You're free now. Pack your things tomorrow. Our house is getting a new hostess." He gestured toward the doorway with a theatrical flourish. Everyone turned, stunned, but I only smiled quietly because I had known everything for months, and my counter-gift to him would be far more devastating. Today was supposed to be one of those rare days that can reshape an entire life. For the first time in many years, Elena felt truly calm inside. The usual knot of anxiety that had squeezed her throat for so long had finally loosened. She stood before the tall mirror in her bedroom, fastening delicate silver earrings she had bought herself at a sale last year. Her fingers moved steadily, without the slightest tremor. 15 years of marriage were supposed to be celebrated with warm embraces and nostalgic stories. Instead, Elena smiled for a completely different reason, a secret known only to her. That secret filled her with quiet, powerful confidence. "It's all right," she whispered to her reflection. Her eyes looked especially bright and determined today. Everything will finally fall into place. For over 3 months, she had known what Alexander had tried so hard to hide. The intimate messages, the hotel bookings disguised as business trips, the secret transfers to another woman's card. He had left traces everywhere, carelessly, as if she were blind or too naive to notice. Perhaps he believed she should be grateful that he still came home at night instead of leaving immediately. But today, on their anniversary, he had decided to stage a public spectacle. He thought he would shock her, humiliate her in front of everyone. Elena adjusted her hair and thought with cold amusement, "Go ahead, Alexander. Let's see who ends up looking foolish." Guests began arriving at 7 in the evening. Their spacious country house, bought 7 years earlier, filled with laughter, pleasant music, and the rich aroma of roasted meat, fresh flowers, and candlelight. Friends from youth, relatives from both sides, colleagues and neighbors settled around the long wooden table covered with appetizers, cheeses, olives, and sparkling drinks. Elena, or Ellie as Alexander occasionally called her in tender moments, sat at the head of the table in an elegant red dress that perfectly hugged her figure. At 37, she looked fresh and confident, with thick chestnut waves falling over her shoulders and warm brown eyes that sparkled with quiet cunning rather than fear. Alexander, tall with silver at the temples, played the perfect host. He poured wine, smiled broadly, and radiated self-satisfaction. "Ellie, darling, bring another bottle of champagne from the kitchen, will you?" he said casually, without even glancing at her, as if giving orders to a waitress rather than the woman who had spent 15 years with him. She nodded obediently and left the room with calm, measured steps. How convenient it was to play the role of the invisible wife when it served her own plan, a plan she had nurtured for months. In the kitchen, she took the bottle from the refrigerator but paused, leaning against the counter. She closed her eyes for a moment and remembered how it all began. 15 years ago, they had been young and full of dreams. He was an ambitious manager. She was a school teacher who wanted children and a cozy home. Their wedding had been modest but joyful. Yet over time, Alexander climbed the career ladder and started his own business, while she stayed home raising their children and managing the household. "It's all for us, sweetheart," he used to say, while spending money on gifts for others. Elena opened her eyes and shook off the memories. Today was not the day for nostalgia. Today was the day of reckoning. When she returned to the living room and set the bottle on the table, the atmosphere was lively. Alexander suddenly clapped his hands loudly. "Everyone here? Excellent. Let's begin." A heavy silence fell over the room. Even the music seemed to fade. Alexander stood at the head of the table, swaying slightly on expensive shoes, his fingers trembling with excitement. His eyes gleamed. "Friends, attention," he called out, raising his glass. "Today is a truly special day. 15 years with my—" He paused dramatically. Then he lifted a finger. "But I have prepared a small but very important surprise for her." Guests smiled expectantly, anticipating romance. Alexander approached Elena, bent down with a wide grin, and handed her an envelope. She took it calmly, as if she already knew the ending of the movie. Inside lay a one-way plane ticket to a Turkish resort and a short note. Alexander laughed loudly. "There you go, Elena. You're free. Pack your bags tomorrow. My new wife is moving in. I've decided to live honestly and start a new life." He spread his arms like an actor taking a bow. He expected tears, screams, begging. Instead, Elena simply looked at him with a gentle, almost tender smile. The corners of her lips trembled, not from tears, but from restrained laughter. Alexander faltered for a second. Guests sat frozen. Someone coughed awkwardly. Sensing the wrong reaction, he snapped his fingers and turned toward the door. "And here is my new wife, Victoria. Come in, darling, don't be shy." A young woman of about 25 entered, tall and long-legged, wearing a tight silver dress that shimmered with every movement. She walked with a sway, hugged Alexander around the waist, and smiled brightly at the guests. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Shock replaced celebration. Elena's mother turned pale. Alexander's father frowned. "Alexander, have you lost your mind?" whispered one of Elena's friends. He only laughed louder. 15 years is a long time, friends. Time to start over with a clean conscience. Elena, you always dreamed of the sea and traveling. Here's your chance. Fly, relax, while Victoria and I begin our real life in this house." Victoria smiled dazzlingly. "Alexander has told me so much about all of you," she said, in a sweet voice that cut like glass. Elena remained seated. The ticket lay before her like evidence. She slowly raised her eyes to her husband and smiled wider, the smile of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment. "Interesting," she said quietly, yet clearly enough for everyone to hear. Her voice was calm and slightly husky. "Very interesting. Please continue, Alexander. Tell us more. I'm all ears." Alexander frowned but quickly recovered his smirk. "What is there to tell? The relationship has run its course. The children are almost grown. The house, the business, the cars, everything is mine. Take your clothes and leave tomorrow. Victoria deserves better." "Alexander, maybe not here?" His mother tried to intervene. "No, Mom, exactly here. Let everyone know the truth." Tension thickened. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Some reached for their coats. Elena only nodded. "A scandal? Why?" "Thank you for the gift. It's very symbolic, a one-way ticket." Her smile widened and triumph flashed in her eyes. Alexander pressed on, not noticing. "You understood? This is serious. Tomorrow you leave." "Yes, Alexander. Tomorrow your new life begins," she replied softly. He looked confused. Something in her calm tone unsettled him. "Tell us, please, how you and Victoria met," Elena continued sweetly. "It sounds like a movie." "At work," he muttered. "She's my new personal assistant. Young, ambitious, energetic. Not like some who only know how to sit at home." Gasps filled the room. Elena's mother stood up. "Alexander, how dare you? Elena raised your children while you were away on business trips." "Mom, sit down," Elena said gently. "Let him speak." "Victoria, how long have you been together?" "Almost 6 months," the young woman answered, blushing. "We truly love each other. Alexander said you two had been living like neighbors for a long time." 6 months, Elena echoed. "That matches the messages I saw on your phone, Alexander. The password hasn't changed since 2017. Quite original. 1, 2, 3, 4. Every sweet message, every plan to meet, every, 'My little one, wear the lingerie I bought you.' I read them all." Whispers grew louder. Alexander's father shook his head. "Son, this is shameful." Alexander's face turned crimson. "So what if you knew? You stayed silent like a fool." "Well, now I've said it honestly. Pack your things and get out. The house is mine. I paid for it." Elena opened her handbag and placed a thick folder of documents on the table. They landed with a heavy slap. "No, darling. 5 years ago, when your business nearly collapsed, you took a loan using the house as collateral. Then, to avoid tax issues, you signed a deed of gift transferring the house to my name. You said it was temporary formality, remember?" Alexander turned pale. "That was temporary. We agreed to transfer it back." "Where is the agreement in writing?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "There isn't any, so by law the house is mine." Guests froze. Victoria stepped back from Alexander. "Alexander, is this true?" she whispered. "Shut up," he barked. Elena continued calmly. "And another small detail. We are no longer married. I filed for divorce 2 months and 3 days ago. The court hearing was without your presence. You signed the papers among all the business documents without reading them, remember?" Alexander snatched the papers, his hands shaking. "You treacherous bitch!" he shouted, spittle flying. The room fell deathly silent, except for the ticking of the wall clock. Elena slowly rose. The red dress looked like a victory banner. "And you, Alexander, came to our anniversary, handed me a one-way ticket in front of our friends and parents, and announced that your mistress was moving in. You expected me to faint, to beg on my knees. No, darling. You are the one who is petty and cowardly." The first applause came from Elena's friend Anna and two other women. Then Elena's mother clapped loudly and proudly. Soon almost all the women joined in. Most men nodded silently, their eyes saying the same thing. He deserved it. Alexander looked around like a trapped animal, but found no sympathy. Even his own mother looked away. "What about the business?" he croaked. "The company is yours," Elena agreed. "But the additional capital we invested came from my grandmother's inheritance. Plus, I took out a loan at 19% when you had cash flow problems. All documented. In the divorce, I'm claiming my share, $1,240,000 plus interest." Alexander collapsed into his chair. "I don't have that kind of money right now." "I know, darling. That's why I've already filed for division of assets. Tomorrow your accounts will be frozen, the car seized, and bailiffs will visit the warehouse." She gestured around the living room. "And this house, you must vacate by noon tomorrow with all your belongings, along with Victoria if she hasn't already run away." Victoria took 2 steps back and pressed against the wall. "Alexander, I didn't know it was this serious," she whimpered. "Get out," he roared at her. Elena turned to the guests. "The celebration continues. More champagne for everyone." But Alexander jumped up and grabbed her arm. "You won't get away with this. I'll hire the best lawyer. I'll contest everything." "Contest it?" she replied, calmly removing his hand. "My lawyers are waiting for that. And now get out of my house." Applause erupted. Guests stood and embraced Elena. Alexander, red-faced, grabbed Victoria's hand and stormed out. His car roared away into the night. Elena sat down, exhaled, and allowed herself a triumphant smile. She had won, not with tears or screams, but with preparation and calm intelligence. Yet this was only the beginning. The very next morning, Alexander returned, this time accompanied by a lawyer. Elena met them in the living room with fresh coffee and the same calm, confident smile she had worn the night before. The red dress had been replaced by simple home clothes, yet she looked more radiant than ever. "Well, hero of the romance novel," she said lightly, gesturing toward the sofa. "Sit down. Let's talk like adults." Alexander looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, rumpled shirt, hands that could not stay still. The lawyer, a middle-aged man in a strict suit, opened his briefcase and spread documents on the table. "What now?" Alexander asked through clenched teeth, barely holding back his rage. Elena slid a clean sheet of paper and a pen toward him. "These are my conditions. First, official alimony for the children, 40% of all your income. Second, half of your share in the company will be transferred to me within 1 week. Third, you leave this house today before evening with all your belongings and never appear here again without my permission." The lawyer cleared his throat, quickly reviewed the papers Elena had prepared in advance, and spoke quietly. "Alexander Viktorovich, I advise you to sign. Otherwise, in court you will lose much more. And you will pay extra for my services if we go the legal route." Alexander stared at Elena. In his eyes burned hatred, shame, and a tiny spark of respect he had never shown her during their years together. "One more question," Elena added, leaning forward slightly. "Victoria is pregnant, isn't she?" Alexander flinched as if struck. "How do you know?" "Messages, darling. The test came back positive. Congratulations on the new addition, but the house remains mine, so start looking for an apartment for your growing family." He broke. His shoulders slumped. With trembling fingers, he signed every page. Then he collected his things in silence, left the keys on the table, and walked out. The heavy front door closed behind him with a final, soft click. Elena stood by the large window and watched his car disappear down the driveway. She opened the window wide. Warm May wind rushed into the house, carrying the scent of blooming lilacs. Life went on. The children called her that same evening, supporting their mother. Friends invited her for meetings. And Elena? She took the one-way ticket that had been meant as humiliation and dialed the travel agency. "Good afternoon. The ticket to Antalya for tomorrow. Please change it to the day after tomorrow. She hung up, smiled to herself, and whispered, "Happy anniversary to me, Elena. Happy new life." 2 months passed. Alexander now lived in a small, rented 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. Victoria, already in her 3rd month, constantly complained that this was not the life she had imagined. Creditors called every day. The business he once considered entirely his own was falling apart. Without Elena, who had quietly managed the accounting and maintained important connections for years, everything crumbled. Clients left, suppliers demanded prepayment, and debts grew like a snowball. Elena returned from Turkey tanned, with a stylish short haircut and the light, free smile of a woman who finally breathed deeply. The house sparkled with cleanliness. The children came home for holidays from college. In the evenings, she drank wine on the terrace, looked at the stars, and thought how 15 years of patience had led to this incredible feeling of freedom. One Saturday evening, the doorbell rang. On the video intercom screen appeared Alexander, disheveled, with bags under his eyes, wearing a wrinkled shirt. "Lena, let me in. I need to talk. Just 5 minutes." She could have ignored him, but she opened the door. Let him see how she lived without him. He stepped inside, looked around at the renovated kitchen, new curtains, the smell of fresh pastries, croissants that Elena had learned to bake during her trip, and swallowed hard. "Looks beautiful," he squeezed out. "Take a seat. Would you like coffee?" Out of old habit, she poured him a cup and sat opposite. "Listen, I signed everything you wanted. I transferred $500,000 in parts. I pay alimony. But can I at least take my tools from the garage and the old motorcycle?" Elena took a sip. "Take the tools. The motorcycle has already been sold. I posted an ad. It went in 3 days. People buy quickly when the price is half the market value." Alexander turned pale. "You did it on purpose?" "No, I simply needed money for the bathroom renovation. You remember how the pipes leaked. Now we have beautiful Italian plumbing." He lowered his head. "Lena, I messed up completely." Victoria left. She said she didn't sign up for poverty, took her things and went back to her mother in another city. Now I'm completely alone. Elena looked at him calmly, without hatred. That feeling had burned out on the anniversary night when he handed her the humiliating ticket. "I'm sorry it turned out this way," she said finally. "Truly sorry. But you chose to humiliate me in front of everyone. You decided I was nothing. Remember how you shouted, 'Everything is mine. Take your ticket and get out.' Well, now you're the one who left with nothing." Alexander clenched his fists. "I thought you would cry, beg me to stay. You always endured everything." "Exactly," she nodded. "I endured for 15 years, but my patience ended the moment you turned my humiliation into a public show. I simply stopped being convenient." He stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the well-kept garden that had once been overgrown. "Can I at least see the children here sometimes? I don't want them to see the hole I live in." "Of course. This is their home, and it always will be." Alexander nodded, drank his coffee, and suddenly asked, "Are you with someone already?" Elena smiled easily, without bitterness. "Not yet, but for the first time in many years, I'm not afraid of this question. Someday there will be a good man, one I choose myself, one who won't check how much I'm worth without him." He was silent for a long time. Then he took a small velvet pouch from his pocket and placed it on the table. "This is yours, the wedding ring. I found it while packing." Elena picked up the ring, twirled it between her fingers, and put it back in his hand. "Keep it as a memory that you once knew how to be different. Or sell it and buy something you need." Alexander left without looking back. The door closed softly. Elena opened the same bottle of champagne that had remained from the anniversary. She poured a glass, stepped onto the terrace, and raised a toast to herself. "To freedom, Elena. You earned it." Somewhere in the distance, music was playing. Neighbors were celebrating something. Suddenly, she wanted to dance right there, in slippers and a home dress, under the stars. She turned on her favorite song and spun across the terrace, alone, yet not lonely, because now the whole world belonged to her, and no one would ever again hand her a one-way ticket.